Hello and welcome. I'm Robin Smith, certified trauma and relationship coach and the founder of the Rock Your Relationship movement and the Rock Your Relationships Sisterhood group in Facebook. So glad you're here with me. If you are someone who struggles to connect in your relationship, if you feel stuck in unhealthy patterns you don't know how to get out of, then this video is for you. And let me tell you that so many people that I work with feel this way and they don't know how to get out of it. They don't know how to make the shift, and they're repeating the patterns over and over again, either with the same person or with new people, whether it's with friendships or family members or lovers or at work even. And it's affecting their capacity to connect and to feel at ease and to have joy in their relationships and in themselves. So if this is you, stay tuned, because I'm going to be talking about why this might be happening, what the source is, and how to start shifting that. We're going to look at childhood trauma as the source of, or the potential source of, these types of patterns, and then what you can do about it. So let's start with, what is childhood trauma? It's a big term, it's a broad term. So I'm going to break it down into what we call in the trauma world developmental and complex trauma that usually happen in childhood. There can be a shock trauma that happens in childhood too, which is a one-time event that's shocking to the system. But let's especially look at when there's ongoing adverse experiences that are adverse, meaning that can be difficult or upsetting for long periods of time, or ongoing, or multiple events that happen, especially while you're developing. So in the early years of life, especially the first few years of life, and even in the womb, when things happen, it affects how you are wired. It affects your neural development and therefore your nervous system. And anything that happens chronically, i.e. repeatedly, while you're a young person, so especially in your growing years up to the teenage years when you are forming your sense of self, and if it happens between you and a caregiver, or in your family of origin especially, or between you and anyone who you respect, like a teacher or a priest or something like that, it can greatly impact your ability to regulate yourself emotionally and physically, and to feel at home in your body, and to feel safe, and to be able to connect and create close relationships. So this is the type of trauma that I'm talking about. It doesn't have to be abuse. It doesn't have to be something big like a rape or a car accident or living in a time of war, although all of those are traumatic. But I'm speaking more about childhood experiences that are difficult and especially ongoing, and impact your sense of self. So let's give some examples to help this land with you. When your caregivers, i.e. parents or anyone who is taking care of you, are not present for you, either emotionally or physically, it's a type of neglect. You're not getting your needs met for care, for attention, for love, for support, let alone for your physical needs like food and shelter and things like that. That's one example. Another is if you feel like you have to care for others, and instead of being cared for, maybe you're the oldest child and your parents aren't available, and so you have to care for all your younger siblings or one younger sibling. Or maybe you have an ill parent who's in bed and you have to care for them, so then you're not getting your needs met. Maybe your caregivers are strongly punitive, they punish you or are highly critical. And so you always feel like you're never doing it right, and you're not lovable until you do it right. So you might have the experience of conditional love, and maybe it's conditioned based on your looks, like you have to be cuter, or maybe it's based on your performance in school or in sports or something like that. And so you feel like, and you're taught that you only receive love and positive attention when you excel, when you succeed. And so this is conditional love versus unconditional. Or maybe you get, let's say, take this another level, that this is based on love, based on what you do versus who you are. So just wanted to clarify that a little more. Or maybe you're not allowed to be yourself. Maybe you're forced or pushed to do something you don't want to do, like hug that person or study that discipline, even though it's something that doesn't relate to you or resonate for you. You're kind of pushed to do things you don't want to do. So you're not really allowed to be yourself. So these are all examples of what your early trauma could have looked like. And if yours was different, feel free to put that in the chat and we can learn from each other. And I also want to say that it's super common that pretty much everyone I've ever met has some type of childhood trauma. Why? Because your caregivers couldn't do it perfectly. They didn't know everything they needed to do. They couldn't read your mind. They didn't always know why you were crying or what was going on for you and how to attend to you. And likely they had their own childhood trauma. So they're responding to that and dealing with that, their own patterns that are affecting you. So we all have some sort of imperfect childhood, and we don't have to always call it traumatic, but there are many things that are traumatic that because they affect our well-being, our sense of self, our neurodevelopment, and sense of safety. Okay, and now let's look at how it can still be impacting you as an adult. So if you're in adult relationships and you're finding, I'm still getting in these same types of arguments, or I feel so insecure and I think people don't like me, or I feel like I always have to prove myself, or I'm always working harder and then feeling mad about it, then you could be repeating your childhood patterns. And why do we do that? Why can't we just stop? Is a great question to be asking. And that's often because when these patterns start early, when these adverse experiences happen early in life, they affect our sense of self. We feel and we tell ourselves, because we're children, and this is what children do, we tell ourselves, it must be me, there must be something wrong with me, I'm imperfect, I'm faulty, I'm a failure. And so we create it about me, and that's why it affects our core sense of self. So then we have these negative self-beliefs that we end up carrying forward into our adult life unless we directly make a shift around that. The other reason is because we create survival strategies based on these core beliefs and adverse experiences to get ourselves through these difficult times. And then that becomes habitual. That becomes just how we cope and what we've always done and what worked for us. So it's really hard, one, to see that we're doing that, and two, to see how to change it, because it's like we're in a tunnel. It's all we know, and we haven't been able to shift it because it's so familiar and it's so habitual. We just go to it automatically. So we have to get super conscious and aware to shift out of these patterns. And often we have to get help. I'm going to talk about that soon, how to shift the patterns. So how it might show up in your relationships, to give more specific examples, is you might find yourself overreacting to something that seems actually kind of small when you think about it later. And that's often because a younger part of you was really impacted by that. It feels big to a younger part of you, even though the adult part of you was like, wow, why did I even think that was so hurtful or such a big deal? So we have these different parts of ourselves, the younger parts and the older parts. And we're not always in our adult self when we're getting triggered. It triggers a younger self often that has the reaction. So that's one thing that it might look like. Maybe you overreact by getting really anxious or getting really mad or throwing a tantrum or hurting somebody or hurting something, storming out of the room, things like that. Maybe you shut down. So instead of getting big and overreacting, you kind of withdraw and you go away. You walk away, you go into your room, maybe you sulk and you feel sad and depressed. And maybe this is your way of avoiding conflict and avoiding ultimately disconnection. So it's better to avoid the conflict than to feel the pain of the conflict. And so you disconnect completely. And the irony is that you're creating more disconnection by doing that, because you remove yourself from the connection. So take notes for yourself if this is landing for you, if this resonates. Maybe you find yourself continuing to attract unavailable partners, emotionally unavailable or physically unavailable. And or maybe on the flip side, someone who's really controlling of you and wants all of you and wants to take advantage of you and manipulate you. So this can be, again, because that's familiar to something you had in your childhood, and it feels safer than the unknown, or it feels safer than real intimacy and real connection because you don't know what that is. Maybe you find yourself trying really hard to be liked. You're looking for approval. You're trying to win people over. Maybe you do that by lying, or maybe you do that by working overtime, or by being really nice or really cute. And again, this might be for fear of rejection, and again, that's a type of disconnection. Or maybe you hold back your needs, your truth of what you really want and need, or you hold back your boundaries and you don't say what's not okay for you. And again, these both might be fear of rejection. So just, again, take notes, rewind and watch again. If any of that lands, you want to write it down. So these were some examples of how your childhood trauma may be showing up now as an adult in your adult relationships and any type of relationship. And I'm going to give an example of a client that I worked with a while ago who had some of this going on. She was super afraid of having a boundary at work. She would say yes when she wanted to say no. And because she always said yes to even things that were outside of her her definition of what her job was, she would get more and more put on her plate because she was good at it and she would do it, even though it wasn't part of her job description. And so that created resentment for her and exhaustion because she was working way too much, but she didn't know how to say no, and she was afraid to say no. And then she also was really afraid to speak up for what she did want and need, especially in her personal relationships. So she would go along with by saying yes to whatever other people want, but wouldn't really say and speak forward for what she wanted. So again, she didn't feel like she was really getting her needs met in either case. And through our work together, she learned about these habits, and she started to get, it wasn't them, it's me, and I have to make a shift. And she started to have stronger boundaries and to be able to say no, and that's not okay, and that's not part of my job. And she also began to ask for what she truly wanted and to be able to express her needs without the fear of rejection or losing or abandonment, losing the relationship. And she now has the best relationship she's ever had, and she's super happy. So that's what's possible when you get in touch with these patterns and you get support in working through them. So let's talk about how to move forward for yourself. So as you've heard me mention already, the first step is always awareness. And I would add, it's non-judgmental awareness. So you want to start noticing, oh, I'm doing that again. I just overreacted, or I just said no when I just said yes when I really wanted to say no. So you want to start seeing the pattern, but not judging yourself for it. So the last thing that's going to be helpful is being hard on yourself. You're probably already too hard on yourself. You just want to notice the pattern without judgment. And especially those that are repeating with multiple people or the same person. And I want to say to you that healing happens in safe connection. So if you feel really alone in this pattern, it's important to start outing yourself, to start getting support, whether it's with a close friend, someone that you feel safe with, that you can talk to and you know won't judge you, or a family member or your partner, whoever that is. Or if you don't have that type of person in your life, a therapist or a coach. And ideally, both is great. But if you don't have safe people in your life, then working with a coach can be really helpful to develop a sense of safety in relationships. And that can help you create healing and healthy relationships outside of therapy or coaching. So I highly recommend that, because when these are relational patterns that happen in relationship, and so healing them inside of a relationship, inside of a healthy healing relationship, is really powerful and kind of the only way it can heal. It's really hard to just do this work from a book, because it takes the dynamic and learning through the kind of the ins and outs of sharing yourself, being seen, getting heard, opening to feedback, trying things out with somebody is going to really help you. So, and And one practice I want to give you as a takeaway for this training today is practicing self-compassion. So what does that look like? Every time you notice you're in a pattern, I already talked about the non-judgmental awareness. So there's actually 2 tips to take away today. Start with that, just the noticing you're doing it. But the second one is having the self-compassion. So instead of that being hard on yourself, as I mentioned before, what that might look like is really the opposite of being hard on yourself, is being gentle with yourself and being kind to yourself and being understanding with yourself. And so that might look like, oh, I did that again, and maybe a hand on your heart or a self hug, and just saying something to yourself like, it's okay. I'm a product of my childhood. I couldn't help it. That's all I know. I want to do better, but I did it unconsciously and I'm learning. I'm doing my best. So you would speak to yourself the way you might speak to an innocent young child who's doing her best. You wouldn't slap her around and punish her and throw her in her room. Ideally, you would talk to her and help her feel okay about herself and not beat herself up. So that's what I'd like you to do for yourself. If you find yourself in these patterns, and then ideally get some professional support if you know that you're just really stuck and you can't get out of it alone. So again, a reminder that you are not in this alone. This is very common. I've worked with hundreds of people who find themselves in very similar situations. We are wired for survival, and we have to train ourselves to rewire for love and connection. And for most of us, it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. So if you recognize yourself in this content today and you know you would like support and you would like to talk to me, I'd be happy to meet with you. And I do have some times open on my calendar for a complimentary relationship breakthrough session. You can find the link below this video. And in that session, that's free, 30 to 45 minutes, we will look at what you're seeing is your pattern and where you want to be. And I'll help you close the gap for how to get to where you want to be. And we can talk about working together if that's a fit. And there's absolutely no pressure to do that. And many people have gotten a lot of value out of that free session. So I hope you take me up on that and click the link. And please remember to like and subscribe if you found this helpful. It helps more people see this content. And thanks for watching. Have a beautiful day.